So the new agent Vyse is finally here.
Hello?
And it looks like she's gonna find her way into the meta. I've been playing Vyse in Radiant lobbies a lot over the past few days, so here are some insights you need to know if you're looking to play her. But real quick before the video, if you're tired of trying to improve on your own, my team of Radiant coaches and I will help you climb 500 RR guaranteed or your money back inside our premium 10-week coaching program called the Immortal Roadmap Program. If you're serious about ranking up, book a free call with me or one of our coaches using the link in the description below to see if we'd be a good fit. Now back to the video. First, since Vyse is a sentinel, let's talk about perhaps her most interesting ability, Cheer, or her wall. When I first saw the reveal trailer, it seemed pretty exciting. It's a wall that goes up and triggers after an enemy passes it, making it an excellent way to isolate a single player while stopping the rest of their team. And just like in the trailer, that's exactly what it's used for. If you've played a few games of Vyse, you've probably come to notice that it isn't as simple as just placing the wall in the main choke point and picking up that free kill while completely stopping the push. That's because you can easily counter the wall by jump peeking. Does that mean the ability is bad? No. Definitely not, but you will have to be a bit more creative. Vyse's wall is a great tool to isolate fights, and when you combine it with your other abilities, you're getting yourself in an isolated duel where you will also have a serious advantage. But like we just mentioned, there are some caveats. If your enemy is close to the wall, they can see it and hear it, and while you can't break it both before and after it's been triggered, you can activate it by tactically jump peeking it. For that reason, you need to make sure that your wall is in spots where it can't be easily jumped. For example, placing your wall just outside of garden more or less achieves the same objective as placing it in the choke point, but it's harder for your opponents to safely jump it, making it more effective. Alternatively, you can use your wall for ratty and more aggressive plays. By placing your wall in hookah, like so, you give yourself a nice angle that you can even play with a shorty. That way, you can get a 1v1, steal a gun, and ultimately win more eco rounds. If you really want to be creative though, and I advise you to do so, you can also go for setups like this. Here, you basically have your wall set up so that you can get an awkward and unexpected 1v1, where you can get yourself an easy kill and then give yourself an easier time dealing with the rest of the push. Of course, the more of your abilities you combine with these types of defense setups, the better. If you can get a 1v1 on a blinded opponent who is also slowed and can't really move because otherwise they'll take damage, then you should be winning that fight 10 out of 10 times. Now, I should mention a couple of things. First, I found that you can tactically use quote-unquote bad walls where you give your enemies the opportunity to try and jump trigger your wall in a very specific spot. For example, if you place your wall sort of diagonally like this on A main, it means that your enemy can jump peek it, but only if they're all the way on the right. Now, if your teammate smokes main because maybe you heard some steps, that makes it extremely likely that your enemies will try to activate your wall, which you can then take advantage of by spamming it. Of course, you'll still need to spray before your enemies actually go for the jump trigger, so timing is important. Second, it's important to think about how you want to use your shear on attack. The ability is fairly cheap, it only costs 200 credits, and it does give you info when it's activated, so it can effectively function as a flank watch. But at the same time, if you can get it in a nice spot in a post plant, it's also very powerful, and it can make enemy retakes extremely difficult. For that reason, it's usually worthwhile to try and hold onto it, especially if you have another sentinel with trips. But even if you don't, it can often be worth it just to tell your team to watch out for the flanks and make your post plants that much more powerful. Now, I've kind of mentioned it already, but in order to really capitalize off of the opportunities and isolated duels that your wall gives you, you have to combine it with your other utility. For that, one of your abilities is your Razor Vine, which is a slow plus damage molly. That's kind of a Sage Slow meets KJ nade. Although it doesn't do as much damage as a Nano Swarm and also doesn't slow down people as much as a Slow Orb, it's a powerful ability with many uses. For example, if you're using it defensively, you can pre-place it around choke points just like you can with a Killjoy Molly, and it'll go invisible shortly after placing it. And while it only slows for 15% compared to a proper slow with 50%, it's still pretty effective at putting your opponents in an awkward spot because walking through the vine makes a loud noise and every few steps it'll make you take chip damage. That means that 1, you shouldn't expect your molly to kill enemies on their own, as you can sometimes expect with nanoswarms. But at the same time, it's still a really strong ability to combo with others, especially since the range is very large and it lasts a long time at 10 seconds, and it's even quite cheap at 150 credits a pop. Aggressively, it's not as powerful since it can be shot, and if enemies see it land, they can shoot it before you have time to activate it. And even if you activate it, enemies aren't going to be forced to move out of a position, so it's not the best at clearing angles either. But if you're defending an area during a post plant, because of the large range that the Razor Vine covers and the fact that you have 2 of them, I recommend you place one close to a choke point that you're holding, and maybe another one that you use in combination with your wall and your signature ability. Technically, you can learn lineups and use your Razor Vines across the map, as they follow the same trajectory as Brim Mollies, meaning they have a pretty good range. But if you combine one with your wall and your signature, you can get really powerful combos, so I prefer to do that. And speaking of your signature ability, you get Arc Rose, which is kind of like a Cypher camera that flashes enemies and gives you info instead of, being a camera. Placing it is very similar to a Cypher cam, and once it's in position, it becomes invisible and only becomes visible again for a brief moment when it's activated or if enemies are within 10 meters of range. Now, I should mention that even though it becomes visible upon activation, you can't actually shoot the rose until after the flash is used, so if you see it being popped, turn and don't shoot it. But what makes this flash really powerful is that unlike any other flash, Vyse can have her gun out while using it. You have your wall watching an angle, and the moment an enemy passes it, you immediately punish by flashing and peeking. If you want to make it even more powerful, you can add a Razor Vine to obstruct movement. And to further increase the effectiveness, you can place your wall in different and more creative places to really catch your enemies off guard and punish them. Now, just like with Cypher, it's important not to put your rose in the same spot every round. If enemies know where to expect your vines, and especially your arc rose, they can simply just shoot them even if they're invisible. But at the same time, you also need to recognize that the 10-meter detection range of your arc rose is pretty far. So for that reason, it's usually best to place your rose in higher up spots, particularly in the back of sites. Find a couple of spots that work well for each site and make sure to change up the placement after you've successfully used it. But that's not everything, because aside from the fact that your flash works really well in combination with your wall to swing blinded enemies, it's also pretty decent at just collecting information.
Blinding!
The cooldown is just 20 seconds for both using it and picking it up. This allows you to use the flash as you're running away from sight to check on any lurks. Then you can pick it back up just before it leaves the pickup range, which is identical to the footstep audio range. And by the time you've rotated, you can already use it again. Another thing that's interesting but will maybe get changed in the future is that if your arc rose has already been used once, it'll keep the current cooldown once you pick it up. So if you've used it 10 seconds ago and pick it back up, you can place it again after the remaining 10 seconds are over. But the weirdest thing is that if the cooldown is already over, you can actually pick it up and place it again instantly. So maybe if you see all 5 enemies spotted on the other side of the map, you can use the flash just to give yourself the ability to pick it up and place it instantly later. Technically, there's another pretty cool thing about the flash, but I've been tactically avoiding it thus far for a good reason. That's because you can place your rose aggressively similar to a breach flash. By right-clicking during the placement of arc rose, you can swap from Cypher Cam mode to breach flash mode, and you can aggressively place your rose through walls and put it in unique positions. Now this sounds amazing on paper, but I would be careful about how you use it. If enemies see you placing your flash, they can simply shoot it and put your flash on a long 45-second cooldown. And by placing it aggressively through walls, it's extremely likely that enemies spot the rose and punish you. So if you don't want your rose to be shot, combo it with other flashes or util, or maybe just use it defensively. And using arc rose defensively might give you more value because you have a really strong tool for aggressive plays anyways, namely your ultimate Steel Garden. Steel Garden kind of steals from Killjoy's Lockdown in that it's a powerful space clearing ultimate that seriously hurts your enemy's fighting chance for the 8-second debuff duration. After a short 3.4 second windup, your enemies will have their primary weapons jammed and they'll be forced to use their secondary or agent ability weapons. While the jamming certainly isn't as powerful as the detain we see from Lockdown, since enemies can still classic you or even rinse you with a chamber op, it's still better in some other ways. For example, because the windup is just 3.4 seconds compared to Lockdown's 13, where it can even be broken, it means Vyse's ult allows for much less counterplay before the effect goes live. Also, since Vyse's ult isn't an object that can be broken, it can be used in more aggressive positions where you normally won't be able to pull off a lockdown. Plus, it even costs an orb point less at 8 points compared to Killjoy's 9. While many players will likely prefer a lockdown over Steel Garden, I still believe it's a seriously powerful ability that can be used in great effect during site takes, retakes, or even to stop an enemy push if you want to. If nothing else, your ultimate is still much better than most other agents, so don't be afraid to take the defuse for the ult point instead of your Omen, Reyna, and many other agents on your team. And that'll be all. Thanks for watching.